my plan was to talk about, the current situation, and I was looking for just random news. And one thing I found that Australian cricket team is in Sri Lanka now.
Yeah, they just arrived, I think, yesterday or day before yesterday. They had shown some concern, saying that whether it was, I think, morally right during this time of economic difficulty for them to have a cricket thing. But I think our cricket board, because Australia coming means a lot of money coming into the cricket board, and I also think that they must be having TV rights and all those contracts and stuff like that organized. So Australia is coming now. Then after that, Pakistan is going to come, and then they are going to have the Asia Cup also here. So I think the life just goes normally. Other than the hardships, the general hardships are normal living. Life just goes on normally for us within the supermarkets and the shops are a bit depleted in the stocks because there were import restrictions for a long time. They have just relaxed import restrictions, but with huge increases in duty, whereas it was completely banned till day before yesterday. So the shops are stuff is depleted. They're still not as bad as what it was a couple of weeks last week with regard to fuel. Gas is short supply. They are still not delivering on a regular basis. Petrol queues are much less, but today there was, I think, there's a delay in diesel delivery, so there were queues for diesel, but the petrol deliveries were regularized, I think, so there wasn't much queues, but still there are like 10-15 car queues still for petrol, longer for diesel. Gas, I think, is more or less, it has been out for a long time, at least for a month. We haven't had any gas, that is LP gas for domestic use. They do supply for the industries and the, I think, the hospitality industry and the factories, but domestic gas has not been supplied for at least a month now. So everybody is going back to basic roots of having firewood, using firewood for, that's of course if you have the space. You have now, even in our house we are using, because like we have 5 dogs, so it takes a lot of time and gas to make their meals and stuff. So we moved over to firewood. Merely because we use the LP gas, we still have 1 canister left, so we are okay for the household, but especially because we use now almost exclusively firewood for cooking. Only for small like dinner and stuff like that we use gas. Electricity also, we had like a long it went up to 13 hours one day of blackouts, but it is now down to about 2 hours, and so that was also issue one with the supply of diesel. And also we were going through a drought period, so because 50% of the electricity generation is from hydropower, so despite all, amidst all the economic issues, the generation of power using hydro also went down. But I think that has now, the hydropower, because the monsoon just broke about a week ago, and the hydropower generation is, I think, more or less up to normal. So that's 50% of the generation. And also the refinery was closed because they didn't have money to get the crude oil. That there has been, I think, a shipment of crude oil which has come, so the refineries also started again. So therefore it's not as acute as it was, but it's 2 hours is still 2 hours of lack of power. So things are improving little by little, but the economic issue will go on for at least another year or so, definitely.
That's a good kind of overall overview. So I think this is good. So I'll pick up those things in small pieces. Because I really want to see, what's going on in terms of political arena. So I think a bit of going back might be a good idea. So the people who are in power, I think their father was like one of those founding figure when Sri Lanka was.
Yes. When we gained independence in 1948, it was the government. It's called the United National Party, which is the party of the present Prime Minister. So they were in power, and at a point of time, I think in 54, SWRD Bandaranayaka, he moved out of the UMP, and so the Rajapaksa, the patriarch, that's D.A. Rajapaksa, was one of the few people who left the UMP with Bandaranayaka in 1954 or 55. And then Mr. Bandaranayaka became the Prime Minister in 1956. So they are from, like generally, at least in the mid 20th century, at the time of independence, politics was always controlled, as in most South Asian colonies, was by the urban elite, English-speaking urban elite. Now in Sri Lanka, we have Sinhalese, Tamils, Muslims, but in all races, it was always the politics was controlled by the urban elite. So the Rajapaksas come from the deep down south, and their political basis in the south, in Hambantota, and traditionally a very socialist leftist area of the country. And Mr. Bandaranaike, also the Bandaranaikers also were very socialist. They were the ones who were responsible for nationalizing all the tea estates and the petroleum industries in the 50s and 60s. So from there, it's a very strange, because in that family, which I always say, so there are, if I'm not mistaken, 5 or 6 brothers in that family, 2 sisters. So Mahinda Rajapaksa was the president earlier. He came into politics and was a member of parliament from 1972. And he joined the more socialist nationalist party, with Sri Lanka Freedom Party, very socialist in outlook, and they had like a closed economy from 1970 to 77. Then one of his brothers, actually, who was the finance minister just till a couple of months ago, Basil Rajapaksa, he was working with the United National Party. Okay, so that's the main opposition. So then one brother joined the police. The other brother, who's the president, joined the army. And I think there's one other brother who became an accountant, if I'm not mistaken. So the family, like, basically was spread over the entire socio-economic area of Sri Lanka in different areas. So naturally, because they are a very political family, with Mahinda Rajapaksa becoming the president in 2005, so Gotabaya, like during the war, he was an army officer, went up to, I think, colonel, and then he left the army and migrated to America. Basil also migrated to America, and when Mahinda became the prime minister and then the president, Gotabaya came back, Basil came back. The other elder brother who was here, who was first in the army, in the police, he also was here. So naturally, when so basically it just seemed down that everybody got into positions of power. So Gotabaya, because of his army background, became the defense secretary in 2006. Basil was a member of parliament involved in the economic side of it. Chamal Rajapaksa was agriculture minister and stuff like that. So it went on like that for till 2014. Then the children started coming. So one son is still still a member of parliament. He was Minister of Sports till recently, and digital media, digital something, infrastructure. The other son, this is Mahinda Rajapaksa's son. So Mahinda Raja, other son went to the Navy. It's like under questionable circumstances, I think. And then he became the father's chief of staff. The youngest son, basically nobody knows what he does, but he's also there. Then the elder brother, that is Chamal's son, became a chief minister of a province and became a minister also. Of course, one thing, the president's son, that is Gotabaya's son, is an engineer, I think, in the States. I think he's working for NASA or somewhere. He is not involved in politics at all, and he's completely out of it. But so with such a large family and being such a political family, it was natural that they were all over the place. And they have been more or less in power from 2005 with a gap between 15 and 19. So obviously, like South Asia, right? How it works with the family politics and all that. Like they basically took over the entire government to the extent that at one point of time, the ministries of which they were the ministers and the president and everybody together, they were in charge of about 80% of the GDP. So that means 80% of the GDP means 80% of all contracts, 80% of all work, expenditure, income, everything. So that's the family history of the Rajapaksas. But as of now, everybody has lost their post. They were forced to resign, and only Gotabaya Rajapaksa is president. 3 or 4 of them are still members of parliament, but they have not been appointed to the cabinet.
So that's a good background of this family.
Yeah.
I'm trying to unfold this thing as a kind of Game of Thrones, like how the different actors are playing roles. So this is like one actor, like one of the key protagonists in this game. I mean, it kind of reminds me, because I did research on Indonesia and East Timor and those kind of Cold War politics. And in 1997, when Suharto more or less overthrown by this economic crisis and all those things, I mean, Indonesia had gone bankrupt, and they're looking for $22 billion from IMF and World Bank. But at the same time, the Suharto family's net worth was $22 billion as well. So the family actually could have bailed out the whole country itself.
I think it was same in the Philippines also. Sri Lanka has $52 billion US loan portfolio. I somehow don't think these guys have taken 52 billion. But there is a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of accusations of corruption within the country. And there's a lot. One of the main demands is that there has to be accountability, and the money should be found. But with today's international money markets and all that, it will be difficult. I think in the Philippines, they say it's 10 billion or something that the Marcoses took. They have, in the 35 years, they have only recovered about 3 to 4 billion. And then the youngest son is the president now. So there are similarities with that, because the youngest son of that's Namal Rajapaksa was being groomed to take over after Gotabaya in 2025. That was the trajectory that they were talking about. Now, famously, Sri Lankans have very short memories, so it's still possible, but I don't think it will happen in 25. Maybe later on, if he resurrects himself politically, there might be still a chance that the Rajapaksa will come back. But the general consensus is that the dynasty that was built from 2005, that dynastic rule is now over. And out of the younger generation, so Namal is there, and then there's another his cousin called Sashindra. He's more regional politician than national level. Namal is definitely national level. I don't think he will have a. I like Sri Lanka. You don't know what really actually will happen at any given moment. For the, I don't think he will be able to make it in 2025, but later on, it might be that he might come back again.
But it shows like why these people need power, because they consolidated so much wealth. So to protect wealth, they need power. So it's like double-edged sword. I mean, no.
Yeah, and not only them, like if none of these people can survive without the other people around them. That is the second level, the ministers, and then the. So for them, down to the regional or the village politician is dependent, because it's a brand in Sri Lanka. Rajapaksa was a brand in Sri Lanka. So every single person down to the village council was dependent on Rajapaksa being at the top for their own good. So it was that the entire system was set up so that the system works for a Rajapaksa to be on top, to the extent that at one election, one of the ministers said, "Look, even if we put a coconut husk as a candidate, as long as it's a Rajapaksa, they will win." So it's a fantastic brand building. It's something akin to what Trump has done in the States, and even Prime Minister Modi. And that brand is independent of the political party that they come from. Because the Rajapaksas were from the SLFP, from which first Prime Minister Sirimao Bandaranaike came in the 60s. The father was in 1950s. Then after his assassination in 58, the wife came in the 60s. Then in the 90s, the daughter came in. The son was a Speaker of Parliament. So that was a family dynasty. So that dynasty was, so like the Gandhis and the Congress in India, SLFP was the Bandaranayakas was the SLFP. But when Mahinda Rajapaksa broke away from the SLFP in, I think, around 2012, 2013, they built up this new party called the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. But the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna and the Rajapaksas are one, but without the Sri Lanka, we call it the SLPP. So the SLPP is just an appendage to the Rajapaksa brand. It's the name recognition and the brand recognition is what is required, what is taking place. But I think that brand recognition, like when brands also, when there's a huge hit on popularity, the brand gets, and it's seriously damaged at the moment.
So if I compare these two brands, like Bandanaik family and Paksas family, so there are two things here. Like one is like political power, and the other one is like economic power, the money power, or the combination of both. So who's leading in this race?
At the moment, of course, the Bandaranayakas are completely out of it. It's only person who is actively involved, like she's in retirement, that is Chandaka Bandaranayake, who was the president from 94 to 2005. She's not actively involved in politics, but I think she's involved in the larger context of politics, like advising and stuff like that. And her children are not into politics. I think they're living in England, professionals. The other two children didn't have children at all. So the Bandaranayakas as a name and a brand in the political system is not in existence anymore. Who are the people who used to be with them as ministers and other political within the hierarchy. So those guys are still there, but the Bandaranayakas themselves are not. And anyway, the Bandaranaikes also had a lot of allegations of corruption, but they came from a very aristocratic landowning
Okay.
kind of family. Even the allegations of corruption are not as much as what the allegations are about the Rajapaksas. Because the Rajapaksas were they were regional, but they could, like, at the moment we don't know, like, they were nowhere near the Bandaranayakas in the social sphere or the political or the economic sphere. I mean, the Bandaranayakas as a family in politics is non-existent.
But also, like, I think the Bandanaik family also got lots of political heat as well. Some of their members were targeted during the, like, Sri Lanka civil war.
Not the Bandaranayakas. The Bandaranayakas, the father was assassinated in 1958.
Okay.
Their family was, in the sense that no politician of that family died during the war. It was more the other UMP, that is United National Party. Most of their leaders died during the war because of bomb attacks and all that. The two where the hope of the nation was on two specific ministers. One was Lalit Atulathmulle, Oxford educated, like very savvy economically also. So he was assassinated. There's questions as to who actually did it. Then there was Gamini Disanayaka, who was again quite popular and they were the ones who were going to be the next generation of politicians, like the leaders. So he died, and with each bomb attack, like 5-6 leaders in the same vintage, they went off. Politically, and then there was Lakshman Kadira. None of them were connected to the Bandaranayakas.
Okay. I mean, that's quite interesting, because then these two dynasties, I mean, it looks like these were not targeted. Why? This two, I mean...
no. So there was a attack. There was a bomb attack on President Chandaka Bandaranayake just before her re-election in 2000. So I think 2000, which failed.
And I think she lost her eyesight.
Yeah, she lost her eyesight. And then Gotabaya Rajapaksa was targeted because he was the defense secretary. Just so I think around 2008, 2007, 2008, they were targeted. But by the time the Rajapaksas came, I think the bomb attacks were completely, although they just kept on happening. The capacity of the LTT to carry out a big bomb attack in Colombo had been negated because it was just indiscriminate bombing just on the side of the road and stuff like that by the time. And from 2007 onwards, the war started, the actual fight, the actual last battle started in 2007. By that time, I don't think they had time to target Colombo, but there were attempts, right through there were attempts. So, and the Bandaranaike, and one of the things that President Chandrika Kumaratunga Bandaranaike was she's very liberal. She comes from a more liberal, Sorbonne educated French kind of background. So she was like very, very popular in the North when she came in originally in 94. But the Rajapaksas have always been nationally. Mahinda Rajapaksa was liberal originally, but they had nationalist viewpoint from the start.
I mean, so like one of the Paksas brother was like one of the military chief who more
he was the defense secretary from
like
2000.
Before defense secretary, he was involved.
He was in the army. He was in the army. He was a colonel. I think he retired as a colonel.
Mm.
He took early retirement and then he went to the States.
So, like, what role did he play during this, like LTT and
So
all?
he was in a active army unit,
Mm.
and he was involved in operations in the north.
Mm. So,
Uh,
so the
yeah.
family is quite like involved in that thing, and then when the LTT is gone, so do you think
Yeah.
that the family treated as like some kind of, they
Not the
consider?
entire family, but definitely, and also, again, that was also part of the brand building. That
Mm.
when they won the war, because so Sri Lanka had a lovely opportunity and a brilliant opportunity after they won the war for Mahinda Rajapaksa to be the next man, Nelson Mandela, right? And
Mm.
like, but they went completely the other way, and they promoted him more as the all-conquering king, to the extent that there were songs being sung that he's the last king of the Sinhalese, or new king of the Sinhalese and stuff like that. So he was elevated to almost god status after he won the
Mm.
war, which so many presidents tried and they did it. Like even now, if there's any respect left for Mahinda Rajapaksa, it is for people don't approve the way he did it, but he did actually stop it.
Mm.
He, let's not say won it, he stopped it. Right. For
Mm.
that, I think there's even now across the board in Sri Lanka, there is definite gratitude to him for focusing it and doing it. Of course, there's different,
Mm.
like in the manner he did it and in the manner it was done. It's questionable. There's allegations of war crimes and stuff like that. But
Mm.
there is across the board, I would say among the Sinhala community and to an extent the Muslim community also. Uh, I wouldn't know what the Tamil community uh,
Mm.
I don't think they have the
Yeah.
same sentiments, but a majority of the Sinhalese and the Muslims still have gratitude because we lived through hell during that time.
Mm.
That gratitude is still there. It's just that he used that gratitude for the completely wrong purposes.
Mm. Mm. So, like, I mean, another character, like one of those, another actor on
Yeah.
the ground is these monks, Sinhalese monks.
No.
How powerful they are.
Not anymore, especially not after the recent protests and all that. Uh, they were very, very powerful during with the Rajapaksas, because see, you must understand that like when the war was going and when they actually said, okay, we are going to finish it, they needed the people behind them.
Mm.
Not the Rajapaksas, the government, the state needed the people behind it. So they went on this fantastic media strategy like thing of getting everybody behind the forces, right? To
Mm.
the so to do that, the one of the main uh, stakeholders that they used was the monks, to say that like look, because they say Sri Lanka is the last place, and apparently Buddha has said that his religion will end up in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka will be the last place that Buddhism will survive. So that has been used, like
Mm.
they have banged that drum for so long,
Mm.
and so that was to get this patriotism out and to get the people behind the forces in that last push, because soldiers were dying like every day, 15, 20, some days 100, 200 were dying a day. So, and those bodies were coming into the south to the villages. So they needed a huge bulwark protecting, saying that it's still worth, all these kids dying is still worth, because we will save the country. So for
Mm.
that, the priests were very, very important,
Mm.
politically as well as to keep the, if I can use the word, morale of the state up. Then naturally, when politics, religion mix, the priests get ideas of position and power. So they became very, very powerful and like getting involved in advising and deciding matters. Because Sri Lanka has a history of it's secular. Uh, the religion is technically separate from the state, but during the last, just before the the British colonized the north, the center of the country, the priest was always the advisor to the king, even then in the 17th century. So those guys, so that still resonates, that the priests are there to advise the state and the president or the leaders, and the leaders should listen to the priests. So that historical fact has been, it became very, very, it came up a lot during the first term of Mahinda Rajapaksa, and the priests did become very powerful. Like they became the power brokers basically. But since of late, that has gone down. Their influence is much less now.
So, like, I mean, when the current government, this Paksas family, they try to ban these chemical fertilizers. I think one of the thing came out as he was trying to appease the monks, because monks want an organic society, pure
Not
society.
Yeah.
I mean, how true is that?
Not monks, one monk.
One monk, okay.
One monk who was, and he became a member of parliament, also politically powerful, also power broker. So he has this idea of, I mean, like banning chemical fertilizer is good by any standard. Organic fertilizer should be the way where we go, but then you don't do that overnight. And also the even internationally, I think the most successful country is Bhutan, and Bhutan also has only about 20% organics. I think that's one of the conversations that happen. So you can't do this overnight, and because like agriculturally, when you fertilize a land with chemical fertilizers for a long time, it will take time to recover and then get back to the same amount, if at all, if they can get the same amount of harvest coming out from organic. There was never any question that organic should be the way where we should go, but it was the decision of complete dictatorial attitude. Like one day you say, from tomorrow there is no chemical fertilizer, and that really killed the economy completely. And then comes back 1 year later and say, he didn't say sorry, okay, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done it. But that was one monk and one doctor who pushed him to do that. Very powerful, two guys.
Is he still there?
The monk is still there. I don't know how politically powerful he is, because at the moment political power is so fluid that nobody knows who is actually has any power. The doctor, he was then also the president of the doctors union. He is still the president of the union, but he's very quiet at the moment.
So, like, if we make a list of the things which affected this current situation, this chemical fertilizers ban, I mean, out of 10 scale, do you think how much it impacted?
For what we economically, what we are now, the chemical ban actually had no impact other than the harvest going down and the productivity going down. And the result of that is only happening this season, this harvesting season this year, because that earlier harvest would have been early this year, it has been down. It's not what it was, but the serious impact will be felt in about 3 months when the next harvest comes in. So economically, or the domestic economy, the rise in the inflation is in that to that, if you're talking about inflation, then the chemical fertilizer ban might be like 8 on around around 8. But the bigger economic bankruptcy that Sri Lanka has come to, the fertilizer ban did not have that much of an impact. That was one of the ill-advised decisions that was taken by this government, that is taken as an example of how not to govern. But as far as the bankruptcy of the country is concerned, that didn't have a direct impact on the bankruptcy issue. Bankruptcy issue, there are several other issues that completely made the mess out of it.
So I'll bring some statistics, because I was reading some articles, and like, I think Johns Hopkins University has got this stat. They said that Sri Lanka's actual inflation rate is actually 133%, which is, I think, 6 times more than the government's, version. Because you are on the ground, so you have more clear picture. I mean, can you walk us through about those things, the price?
So that is a debate that is they are having. I think there's Professor Henke or somebody who does this PP purchase power parity inflation, where his method of calculation is different to what the central banks or most governments do. I think it's purchasing power parity or some system. It is on that base. It is on basis that it's at 133%. So we work on or most government works on the basis of cost baskets or commodity baskets. So those, on that basis, I would say, because the food at the moment, the top line inflation is about, I think they announced yesterday, 40%. Food inflation is much higher at about 50 to 55%. And the food inflation is direct. One is with regard to the fertilizer issue and the lack of production coming into the market. Number 2 is even the harvested vegetables and other commodities coming into the urban centers is being affected because of the petroleum prices, because of transportation problems. Then Sri Lanka is a import dependent economy. So the other than rice, sugar, like the staples like dal, wheat, everything is imported. So because of the dollar crisis, there's a shortage of all of that sugar, dal, milk powder, and also the gas, the domestic gas. So the inflation has many factors that have worked in. I am not an economist to say whether 39% inflation is a correct reflection, but this is the manner in which the inflation has been decided in Sri Lanka from I think for the last 50 years or 20, 30 years or 40 years on this basic consumer price index, and that has been constant. And the criticism, if at all, is with regard to what is in the basket, because especially with COVID, the spending pattern of people changed with COVID and the lockdowns. Now the spending pattern is changing because there is no gas to buy, which is one of the more expensive commodities. There is no fuel to buy. So again, the spending pattern is changing, because if you don't have money to pay for your fuel, then you retain that money, right? So I don't have the economic background to say why it is or whether it is, but I feel historically this 40% is a fair reflection of what is happening. And also the other factor is that fuel has been increased by almost 200% from within the last couple of months. There is huge increase in duty on imported stuff. Wheat has gone up, bread has gone up. That is because of the foreign exchange crisis. Milk powder has gone up, and this is all going up by like 50-60% on the price. Only thing that transportation has gone up. Only thing that has not yet gone up is the electricity, and that is also supposed to be going up soon.
Mm.
So I somehow don't think 133% is a fair reflection of what is
Yeah.
happening.
Mm. Mm.
Around, say, give up plus or minus 5% to 10% would of
Mm.
the 39% would be a
Mm. Mm.
fair calculation.
But again, like, and if even if you talk about 50%, that's a huge,
Oh, that is,
huge rise,
no.
isn't it?
Anyway, Sri Lanka, like compared to other more Western developed economies, our inflation rate has always been 5, 6, 7, 8%.
Okay.
But even this is unbelievable. Like nobody
Yeah.
ever thought that it could go up to this level, because we have never been in the 1%, 2%, 3% inflation rate.
Mm.
It has always been between 5 to 10% of inflation rate,
Mm. Mm.
which was much high. It was like 13, 14% about a decade ago.
Mm.
But it has been controlled.
Mm.
But this is unprecedented.
Mm. Mm. But the problem is because it will create now vicious cycle because people, if the productivity is not there, that means
Yeah.
people will lose jobs. So there'll be less money as well. So the less money and more pricey products. I mean, so and it will accumulate more and more, this kind of
Yeah.
knock-on effect on everything. So I mean, it looks like Sri Lanka needs kind of emergency, some kind of bailout.
It does. It basically needs a bailout because Sri Lanka does not have any money left.
Mm.
Uh, like foreign reserves, like last month officially in Parliament, they said that when they defaulted in April, or they gave notice of default in April, they had 50 million US dollars as
Mm.
foreign reserves. So 50 million US dollars basically means not enough for even 1 days of financing of imports for 1 day.
Mm.
Uh, Petrol tank, pet, ship coming in with petrol load cost $42 million
Mm.
minimum. So they didn't like it's empty. The reserves are empty, usable reserves. There are some other reserves that cannot be used for normal commodity imports. That is there up to about 1.9 billion or something. But that cannot be used for normal imports.
Mm.
But otherwise, import the foreign reserves are almost nil. So we are basically surviving on at the moment, but we are surviving on a 500 million credit line and I think another 1 billion loan from India.
Mm.
And I think they're extending the credit line by another 500 million. So
Mm.
that's why there is a petrol crisis, because there are 4 ships outside the harbor waiting to unload, but the country doesn't have money to buy the oil, right?
Mm.
Pay for the oil. That's
Mm.
it's not that it's not there. It's like you can see it if you go to
Mm.
Colombo and look at the harbor. The tankers are there waiting to discharge.
Oh. Mm.
Just that we don't have the money to do that. So definitely there will be there. So economically, what they are planning on doing it, and I think they are in the process of doing, is the first thing is that they are talking to the IMF.
Mm.
So they are having staff level discussions at the moment. So staff level agreement, they are expecting to arrive at a staff level agreement in June. So, and that is with regard to an extended facility. They are, I think, asking for $3 to $5 billion, but that's over a period of
Mm.
time. Then they are going to start discussions with the bondholders, that's the international bondholders. That is the problem at the moment.
Mm.
Those are the debts that we are defaulting at the moment. So they are going to start discussing there. There definitely will have to be some debt restructuring, either postponement or haircuts
Mm.
or interest waivers or something like that. So that process has also started. But in the meantime, there is a dire necessity of a bridging finance until the IMF extended facility comes, and
Mm.
apparently it's supposed to take at least till August, September, October
Yeah.
for the IMF.
Mm.
It takes about 6 months, I think, with the IMF.
Mm. Mm.
So until that time, for the moment, the last couple of months we are surviving purely because of India and India's extension. And I think they have given facilities up to about 3 billion at the moment. So from what is available in the public sphere, it seems that India and Japan will step in for some bridging finance until the IMF and the restructuring takes place. Because I think they had a COD meeting in Tokyo last week or the week before. And there it was announced that India and China are jointly attempting to come to some form of agreement with regard to bridging finance. So at the moment, that is the most vital thing, the bridging finance until the IMF comes. And with the debt restructuring, hopefully the pressure on the economy and the pressure on the foreign currency reserves will lessen. And when that lessens, then there will be economic stability, at least to that extent that we can go back to normal business. So that's what everybody says, like we are looking at quite a bad 6 months to 1 year, maybe more like 6 months, 6 to 9 months, where there will be serious difficulties. But if the bridging finance comes in and some other, because World Bank is helping with emergency, they are repurposing. So for medicine, because we have a medicine problem also. So medicine and other emergency things, the World Bank and UNICEF is helping out. But long term, it has to be. But even the IMF says unless you restructure the debt to make the debt sustainable, they will not touch it. And I think that will happen, because the original problem is that the debt became unsustainable in 2021, 2019-20. So immediately you become and of course, and the IMF has told the government in 2020 that the debt is unsustainable, but they still went ahead with it. So when the debt is unsustainable, you lose access to the international market. Ratings had gone down by that, I think like CCC or something. When you lose access to the market, that's the end of then you have no money to pay the debts coming in. So what the IMF has said is, you speak to your bondholders and make your debt sustainable. And after you make your debt sustainable, our facility will come and keep it going subsequently. But the fundamental problem is the debt unsustainability of the both bilateral as well as the bondholders.
Like, I mean, I want to bring like a couple of external actors. Like India is one of the external actors, very much linked with Sri Lanka's politics over the years. And I think newcomer is like China a bit. I'm not sure like how much China is involved there. And also the USA, the other guy, the big guy. So I think IMF is linked with these three countries' goodwill as well, because these three countries have to say, you know what, yeah, that makes sense. Can you give us some idea, like so India is kind of default position?
So India has always been there.
Yeah.
Has been a friend most of the time, unless it doesn't. US has always also been there, and being what the US is anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So China was definitely the new player, and Mahinda Rajapaksa was definitely China centric. So other than now they talk a lot about the Chinese debt trap, but we are not in a debt trap to China, because if you take our debt portfolio, the biggest bilateral debt is to Japan. China is almost there. I think that's about like 18% to 17 to 18%. So China and Japan. The biggest multilateral is the ADB. And then India is like on debt. India, other than this time, this 3.5 billion, there was never long term. So China was heavily involved, especially during the second term of Mahinda Rajapaksa. That was from 2010 to 2014. They were heavily involved. All the infrastructure development was funded by Chinese, either government or Chinese banks. Most of the construction was done by Chinese companies. The port sector has huge investments by the Chinese. So their involvement in the economy was quite substantial, and it still is. Geopolitically also, I think, like with this, we were part of this belt, Chinese Belt and Roadway system and the maritime Silk Route system. So they pumped in a lot of money. As a debt issue, I don't think we are in a Chinese debt trap, as people say. Like we have to pay the debt back. That is true enough. The difference between Japan and the multilaterals and China and India is that Chinese debt is more or less on commercial basis. So the interest rate is much higher, but the volume of debt is almost like it's quite balanced. Our biggest debt issue is with the international money market, like the bonds. Politically, of course, so it's a balancing act, and I remember reading somewhere that Sri Lanka had mastered the balancing of India and China, because US, I think, works through India. Whatever pressure or whatever is coming through India, not so much directly. And I think one of the Indian foreign secretaries or former foreign secretaries has said that Sri Lanka had mastered the art of balancing India's interest with China's interest. Of course, at particular points of time, they have, I think, reached a bit too far, because I think at one point, one of the biggest concerns that India had was Chinese submarines were coming to Sri Lankan ports. Then recently there was an issue, like say in the north of Sri Lanka, like northern Sri Lanka, there are about 5 small, not huge islands, 5 islands, and they gave a contract to set up solar farms to the Chinese, and that's 20 miles away from India. I mean, you can't expect India to sit back and say, okay, the Chinese have come 20 miles away. So that was a huge sticking point. So they awarded the contract to the Chinese and then withdrew, and then started talking with India for the same project. So obviously it doesn't, like international relations doesn't work like that. Then in Colombo port, there one terminal is operated by a Chinese company. There was another development with another terminal that was developed. So that was originally supposed to be given to India and Japan, a company. This is like private sector investments. Then that was shelved, and then the talk was that it was going to be given to the Chinese, and then that was shelved, and ultimately the agreement was entered with the Indian company Adani Group. So that, I think, also did not sit very well with the Chinese, that it's international relations, no, whether it's trade or economic or otherwise. If you give your word, you have to do it. So I think there was a bit of to the extent that the Chinese are at the moment, from what you can see, is it's hands off. We are not helping you. Even on the debt restructuring, they have said they have to be treated differently.
It's like a difficult choice, isn't it? It's like you cannot choose both, because that's too much to handle. So, like, what's your own position? Like, Sri Lanka will be better off with China or with India?
I think Sri Lanka would be better off without either. So, like, Sri Lanka was one of the main actors in the non-aligned movement in the 70s. Now, whether that sort of non-alignment, that sort of movement can succeed in a more unipolar system now is questionable. But do we actually, because we are like a pendulum, at one point we go with India. Now, at the moment, we are with India, and India can't do anything wrong. 5 years ago, we were with China, and China can't do anything wrong, to the extent of completely keeping out India in our affairs. Antagonizing. Now, we are going behind, not going behind, we have no choice this time. But China is not treated with the same looked at in the same way as they were looked at in the like 2000 up to 2015. So we need to balance it, and we also do not need, like, it's a multi, even the world economy is, you don't have to choose sides. My person, you don't have to choose in this whole battle between China and India. We don't have to take, we can be the party, the neutral party, who they can use to facilitate if they want something. But we can't sit in the doorstep of India 20 miles away and give everything to the Chinese. In the same way, just because we are 22 miles away from India, India can't dictate as to who our international, who to have international relationships with. So balancing, I think you need a balance. You can't go with either, both economically and politically, because it's unworkable, because the geopolitical position of Sri Lanka is too important to go with one side. So you need to balance it. So either you politically balance it, or if you politically align yourself with one side, then your economy is going to suffer. Without aligning, say, and that is why you need a very transparent, good a government which recognizes and encourages good governance, and not be this opaque behemoth that they have built up, that nobody knows what is happening and nobody knows why you are going with China. Because if we know, okay, this is not happening, that's why we are looking at China, then people can understand. But at one point, if they are running behind China, next point they are running behind India, and because the system governance is so opaque and so controlled, the people don't know the justification of doing this. So now, for the moment, now they are saying, because there's no money coming from somewhere else, India is helping us. That's perfectly okay. That, like, those are circumstances. But if we just say no, we don't want, or we don't say anything, then the obvious inference is we have ditched China and now we want to go with India. So if there is openness and there's transparency and proper governance, then people themselves will also understand, and even internationally countries will understand, why is Sri Lanka doing this, why is Sri Lanka doing that. Here the decisions are being taken by three guys sitting across their breakfast table, basically. Three brothers, or that's what happened up to now.
Like, one of the important thing, like when we talk about this crisis, they try to go back to this, like, this political move by this Paksa's family. So one of the, like, political pledges was low tax for everyone. And in a country when, the state fund needs money, so they did the opposite thing. How much that actually impacted?
So I personally think, and I think it's being accepted more and more, that the main fundamental reason for this crisis is the tax issue. Because we were under a IMF facility from 2016, and the last tranche was to be paid end of or early 2020. And one of the conditions in 2000, the last review, so article for review was in 2019. So one of the main reason or main criteria of that extended facility was that the debt is sustainable as 2019, with the economic numbers in 2019, 18-19. But you need to keep this going, otherwise you are going to be unsustainable in 2 years. And specific advice was given not to raise tax, not to reduce taxes, because if you reduce taxes, immediately you will become your debt will become unsustainable. That was specifically said in 2019 by the IMF, early 2019. Gotabaya Rajapaksa became the president in December 2019. First thing he did was to cut the taxes by unbelievable amounts, to the extent that the loss was 600 billion rupees. I don't know. Those days it was at, say, at 200 rupees. So it like the revenue ratio, GDP to tax revenue ratio, dropped from 12% to around 12% to 8% overnight. Okay, we had or we still have one of the lowest debt to GDP ratios in the world, which is, at the moment it's at 7.9%. So if you have tax revenue of 7.9% and our debt repayment is running at like 90 or 80, 110% of our GDP, nobody in this world can survive. And they knew that. And IMF had told them that. And in fact, in 2020, when there was a RFI flow allowed by the IMF, that is a rapid finance instrument. It's called RFI, because to alleviate the impact economy on because of COVID. And now nobody knew this. Everybody availed themselves. So Bangladesh, I don't know about India, but huge amount of countries got that. And it was no questions asked. Do you have an impact in your economy because of COVID? IMF gave it, subject to their whatever. So we didn't know whether we had even asked for it. Okay. We didn't know whether it was given to us. Last week, a parliamentary investigating committee called the central bank to see what the reasons for this whole collapse was. And in 2020, the IMF has said, you are not getting this RFI even if you are impacted with COVID, because you do not have, your debt is not sustainable now because of the tax breaks given. Therefore, get your taxes up, make it sustainable, we can give this to you. So any decent government would then come back and say, okay, we have serious problem with access to money, let's get the taxes up. They didn't do anything, they stopped going to the IMF. Simple as that. And this came out 2 years later. Nobody knew that we had applied for the RFI, that it was rejected, and the reasons for rejection. And the other, that is on the IMF side, where the debt became unsustainable. The other aspect of the tax break was that in 2019, immediately after the tax break, both S&P, Moody, and Fitch downgraded Sri Lanka to, we were like B+, I think, at one point of time, downgraded us to triple C. It's like basically junk. Right? And in 2020, with that, we lost access to the international market for money, for bonds. So then IMF is not giving us money. The international money market is not giving us money. They just started feeding off the reserves. That's what happened. The reserves, which was 8 billion in 2020, came down to 50 million in 19 months. Because they had no access to the international market or the IMF, or by that time all the bilateral people also knew what was happening. They just started taking the money out of the reserves. And you take money out of the reserves, your cupboard is empty. And obviously you go back to this is not international finance or government finance. This is our household finance. If there is no money coming, there is no, of course, to the extent of one big issue was because of COVID, tourism went to, so we lost 4 billion there. But that was only 4 billion. But if we had the access to IMF or the bonds, that could have been covered. And the other main income or foreign exchange earner is the workers' remittances from abroad. So because they were taking money from the reserves, they pegged the dollar at 203 or something, and the remittances they start going. So those there. So remittances, which was about 600 million a month, dollars a month, is now down to $250 million a month because the banks are not giving what they wanted. There's a huge black market going using this Hawala and Undial systems. So the culmination of all those ill-advised decisions of one not going to the IMF, we were blaming them for not going to the IMF, but now we know that they couldn't go to the IMF. The fact that we were shut out from the international money market, and the fact that the remittances and income didn't come. So at least they could have even at that time raised the taxes. They could have done something, but they kept on saying there's no dollar crisis, there's nothing wrong, until the whole thing blew up in our face. So all those factors, but the main factor, the main kickoff, the trigger was the tax breaks.
Tax break, yeah. So like, I mean, it looks like whatever happens, this IMF loan, whatever it is, it will not come tomorrow. It will take time because of the bureaucracy. So we are talking about if you take like another 2-3 months, do you think the government can sustain another 2-3 months under this?
It can't sustain without bridging finance coming in within the next month, or at least an agreement on bridging finance, and that has, as what we can see now, that is going to come from India and Japan. It's going. I think it's coming, but without that bridging finance, because we are bankrupt anyway, there's nowhere else to go. So with the bridging finance, at least the until we recover ourselves, we'll have some breathing space. Otherwise, it will be no food, no fuel, nothing. It will be just like that. Will be bottom of the bottom that we are in. So I think the government is confident that there's some bridging coming in. India is keeping it going for the moment, but these international finance things don't happen overnight. But if there is no bridging finance by next month, we are in more trouble than what we are in now, if that is possible.
Because the problem is like with this Paxa's family, losing power is quite dicey for them, because then they will be put on trial and go to jail and all those things. So I think they can see those things can happen. So they have to stick to power and then sustain somehow. But I mean, you do you think these people are capable? Because it looks like these people mismanaged seriously last 10 years.
Yeah. So there are two problems here. There's a political problem and an economic problem. Right? Now, what we were discussing was the economic problem. The political problem is unless you and the government is not stable at the moment. Like there are daily very peaceful protests going on, to the extent that there is I don't know whether you know Colombo, there is a esplanade called which is the main meeting point of everybody in Colombo, called the Golf is Green. Now there's a village in that, there the protesters have started a village, and it is called Go Gama. And that is for the president to go. And it is such a village that there is a theater, there is a university, there are libraries, there are food places, and that has been going on for the last almost 50 days, right? So the protest is for the president to go. That is the political issue. This is, although it stems from the economic problem, the protest is political. Political in the sense that you can't have a Rajapaksa in the governing structure of Sri Lanka. That is the ultimate demand, right? We don't care who does it, but it cannot be a Rajapaksa, right? Now, I personally think because of that protest, all the Rajapaksas in the governance structure has gone, other than Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the president. He is the only person who is holding any place of authority or political power among the Rajapaksas now. Of course, there's huge machinations going on doing what you are saying to keep it going. But I think the Rajapaksas, uh, I personally think that it, they have reached the end of
Mm,
their of this, not their political power, but this dynastic power is over. Uh, the only factor is now is Gotabaya Rajapaksa, but
mm,
there are several amendments to the constitution that are coming up by which the executive powers, because in Sri Lanka the president has full executive powers,
mm, mm,
the cabinet is under him. So there are constitutional amendments being proposed to take away all the executive powers from the presidency. So if that happens, even if he stays there, although he has certain powers, uh, the the executive powers will be taken out of the president. That in a way gives him a face-saving way of stepping back. But as a political force for the moment, as of today, I don't think the Rajapaksas are a political force.
mm,
But in Sri Lanka, you can never, and you should never say as of today, because tomorrow will be something completely different.
mm,
But at the moment, I think their political capital has gone.
mm, mm. I mean, especially because I mean, one of the things I teach is like this Middle East, this like Arab Spring, and the how social, movement kind of can seriously turn up in a small amount of time and then, overthrow everything.
Yeah.
So the one example is like Tunisia, like Ben Ali was in power for 30 years. And when the first thing started, he didn't care. And then after a couple of days, he actually went to the TV and says that, oh, you know what, I'm really willing to talk. Let's talk. And then things were getting much worse on the street. And within 7 days, he fled the country. But the problem is with like Sri Lanka, with this kind of dynasty family, I think this will be difficult to flee.
Oh,
So,
it's
so they
an
have to
island.
stay.
No, it's an island. It's not difficult to flee Sri Lanka.
Is
It's
it?
just an island.
But the problem
You
is
just get a boat.
where will they go? I mean, where will they
Well,
go?
everybody, for all the other dictators have found places to live. No, they'll find places, but they can go. They like there's
Because
nothing to
normally,
stop them to
normally
go.
they go to like Saudi Arab, but I mean, like for this Paksas family, they cannot go to Saudi Arab.
I don't think that's an option.
And I don't think the Western country will take them now. So I think that there is a danger. The more they take time, and if the
Yeah.
solution is not coming, there's more risk, and then they cannot even flee at one point.
Yeah.
And then that will more or less destroy their family fortune and everything will be gone. So obviously, the family has got lots of networking around the society. So they will try to mobilize, they will throw money and all those things. Like, I mean, in terms of media, I'll try to bring another actor on the ground. Media, what role they're playing, what kind of, message they are giving to the people.
So the media space politically, if we are talking about political media, the two main TV stations, and we talk about the TV stations, the main two TV stations are government owned and controlled. Within the private media, there are two big media corporations, companies which are pro Rajapaksas. There's no two words about it. There's one channel which is uh, anti Rajapaksa. That's another major. So there are three main players. There are two slightly not so big. They are more balanced in what their outlook is. But among the big three, two are definitely pro-government. One is anti-government. But at the moment, who controls information in Sri Lanka is social media. Not nobody believes, or even if they watch knowing where it is coming from. The information war or the news comes from social media. Sometimes it's not the correct news, it's not the exact truth, but the news is it's basically social media. Like you, I think, because you have always been doing, you will read the newspapers, you will watch the main news telecast and all those things. But the actual news is being done by social
Mm.
media,
So,
and it's all pervasive.
but in terms of social media, who has got the upper hand there?
I think if we can categorize it, the protesters have upper hand. They are much more savvy
Okay.
because it's the young people,
Mm.
more tech savvy, educated, uh, and they on social media they have the upper hand, or at least they had it. But I think they have complete upper hand.
Mm. And in terms of diaspora population, like what role they play?
Actually, so as far as so the diaspora has the Tamil diaspora and the Sinhala diaspora. The Tamil diaspora, and not only the Tamil diaspora, the Tamils in Sri Lanka have, I personally feel, have played a lesser role. It has been the
Mm.
Sinhalese and the Muslims who have been very, very vocal in this movement. The
Mm.
Tamils have played a lesser role, if at all. Uh, of course, the explanation is that like you have started complaining now, whereas we have suffered this for so long, and why should we suddenly get up just because you're suffering now?
Mm. Mm.
So that's a very interesting thing, that the
Mm.
fact that they never they have been supportive
Mm.
definitely, but they have not got onto the streets the way the Sinhalese and the Muslims have done,
Mm.
and I think they have gone through much more hell than us during their lifetime. So the diaspora, to the extent that the Sinhala diaspora has been very vocal and anti Rajapaksas. They were pro Rajapaksa. Those like they came in plane loads when Gotabaya election was in 2019. They actually chartered planes and came to vote for him. But I think majority of them have now turned, and so the the Sinhala diaspora had, like, they had huge protests in London, in Melbourne, and Sydney. Uh, I am not quite sure because I don't have access to that, what the Tamil diaspora's reaction to this is, but it has been, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, it has been muted
Mm.
on
Mm.
that side.
Mm. Because I mean, one thing can come out from this whole crisis that the groups. So you're talking about this like Sinhalese Muslims. They were united, and Tamil might join eventually, and then it can be a serious big force, which can help to reconcile the country as well. The historical all this problem area. So that can create serious opportunity for the new country for everyone.
So that has already happened in I call it, it's called Gota Gogama, the protest site. So May 18th was the end of the war uh, in 2009, and there is always two remembrances. One by the army, or the in the south, and there is always a protest in the north, a protest or a remembrance of the dead, and we call it the Mulli that protest, and that was banned, right? So they could not remember their dead on a day significant for them. This time in Colombo, in the middle of Colombo, in Gotagama, they had a remembrance event for the Tamils who died in the north. So that has happened already, and that was multi-religious. So there were Muslim priests, Muslim Maulavis, Christian priests, Catholic priests, Buddhist priests. Never happened in this country before. So that is happening, and this younger generation is not so torn as like we were. Because we had wars where although we personally didn't, there was definitely a division among the races, and that will take time. Our generation will take time to heal, but the younger generation does not have that issue. So it will be that much easier because there is this space where race or religion has no say in it. And that happened on the 18th of May, which I would have never imagined would have happened. So that part it has started. So maybe if this continues like this, it will work. But it is definitely enabler for better reconciliation, because the people also have realized that these divisions are being introduced by the politicians to keep everybody divided so that they can thrive. That message has gone in, and that it's all the same, and it's these guys who are just getting us involved in all this. That message, I think, has already gone out, and it might be a bit difficult now to introduce racist, racial, or the nationalist defense our country's defense. They still try. I saw even today the defense secretary has said the security is the most important. So they are saying it, but they will always try. But I think we have, in the midst of all this madness, I think to that we have crossed the line to the better.
It's part of that colonial game, the colonial structure, divide, rule, and then the elite, take all the money and all the assets, and it just continues. And just don't know how to unlearn those tropes.
And the divisions, it's like the known ones are religion or race or caste or what. But when they divide you according to the region you come. At least in Sri Lanka, that was not there. It was always race, religion, or caste. But when they start dividing, now they divide you according to the area you come from, the education you have, the background you have, where you come from. So I think people are getting savvy to that these guys are doing this. So I have a feeling, I personally feel that's a positive that has come out of it, this division. This division, people have realized that the divisions are maybe not divisions, that these are human made and done for a specific purpose. If they realize that, and I think most have realized that, it will be difficult to put the people against each other.
I mean, like one of the final thing I want to touch is in terms of the current regime's exit strategy. This is like Chinese scholar, like war scholar.
Yeah.
He was saying that when you fight against a powerful entity, you always have to make sure that you build a golden bridge for them so that they can retreat through that bridge. So if you don't have that bridge, they will not retreat. So in terms of these regimes, I mean, it looks like this regime will not sustain the way things are now. And I don't think they can manage it. So what will be their exit strategy? Do you think the country can forgive them and say that, okay, you know what? Yeah, you can live in peace, but leave us, we can move on. Or do you think there will be retribution?
With regard to retribution, we come from we have a Buddhist background, right? So Buddhism works on karma, right? So karma is whatever bad you do, somewhere down the line, that bad is going to come back to you. It might be, we believe in rebirth and stuff like that, right? So it might not happen. It might happen during your lifetime this time. It might happen next lifetime. It might happen 500 lifetimes later. But if you do evil, you will reap the effect of that evil somewhere down the line. That is one of the fundamentals of Buddhism. So retribution per se is not so strong in the psyche, right? Because so even the Rajapaksas, the Rajapaksas, it's more, you have taken the money, please give us the money back. You can go and live peacefully you want, we have no problem. You go back to your wherever you came from or whatever you do, there is no problem. But you need to give the money. That is one of the main demands, right? So as long as that is there, and they flaunt their wealth, like there's no two words about it. And if they try to flaunt their wealth again, then that will be a step too far. But if they are told, go and do whatever you want, don't, but you have to, some form of recompense must take place, that will work. Because politically, so when you say this government, nobody knows what this government is at the moment, because the Rajapaksa, the SLPP government, lost, like none of them are in power anymore. The Rajapaksa are not in power other than Gotabaya. The Prime Minister at the moment actually is from the United National Party, which has only one seat in Parliament. So he has only one seat, his seat, right? Half his cabinet is from the Rajapaksa, the SLPP. The half is from the SLFP. Then there's another opposition party. There are 3 guys from that. So it's a absolute, it's a mix and match of different kinds of people who are holding it on, and nobody's actually making a huge fuss about it, because at the moment the focus is on the economy, and at least there is some stability in the governance, which was not there for the last month or so. Then things might be okay. But the biggest issue will come when there is stability and you go to the next general election. The Rajapaksas will also keep quiet to see what the outcome of the general election is. Depending on what the outcome is, I think they will decide what to do. Because at the moment, if you go to a general election, they are going to lose really bad.
Yeah.
Because people are under so much economic pressure at the moment. But if everything stabilizes and you have your domestic gas, you have your fuel, you don't have to stay in queues, there's food at a reasonable price. If people are comfortable, then the old games might start again. But I don't know. I can't predict whether people will forget so easily. I don't think they will. So depending on how they fare in a general election might determine how their future prediction is in the politics of the country. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, of course, he has 2 years more. So if the constitutional amendments come, they are targeting within the next 3-4 months, and his power is reduced, then people actually, if he doesn't have the power, I don't think they will grudge him staying the balance 2 years and then going off. As long as he doesn't have the power, because we all thought that he will misuse the power, but he has actually completely mismanaged the power, because the decisions he has admitted the tax cuts, the pegging of the dollar, the fertilizer, every single major decision he has said he made a mistake in coming to that decision in a address to the nation, right? So I don't know whether he has the moral right anymore to be the president when you admit that I have made such huge mess of this country. But I don't think we are like kind of forgiving people. I don't think they will mind if he doesn't have the power. He remains as the president. I don't see a problem there. But people will not tolerate him continuing with all these powers. So if with a constitutional amendment you can take the bigger powers out of him and let him have some, as a head of state, whatever power he has, and you transfer the center of power back to parliament, I think even then people might not seriously grudge him staying for another 2 years. But not the president that is there today.
Mm, mm,
And anyway, parliament is a more democratic space for
mm,
everybody to do it, rather than uh, focusing everything and into one single person.
mm, mm, mm. Because like one thing for sure, because you are talking quite freely with me,
Yeah.
it looks like you're not worried about, talking about government or, the political situation on the ground. The countries like, other countries, third world countries, it's not easy to talk against the government. It looks like there is some kind of, some kind of sanity on the ground, even the things are really bad. But I think people can still speak out, can actually still go to the protest.
Yes. So the protest has been going on for like the organized protest has been going on for 50 days. There was violence only on one day, and that was when Mahinda Rajapaksa wanted to resign. It
Mm,
was organized, and there was an attack on that day that went completely out
mm,
of hand. There was a lot of arson
mm,
attacks, both pro-government, anti-government.
mm,
That was just 2 days. Subject to that, look, you any time of the day, if you and the protest is in front of the presidential secretariat, right, the
mm,
office,
mm, mm, mm,
the protest, and that protest has been going for 50 days, and there has been nothing, and nobody says anything for the moment. Of course, you have to give it to the president and the government. There has been no censorship. There have been attempts to block signals and all that within the area, but now people are savvy. Immediately the whatever those signal blockers came out, there were photographs all over the social media. 2 days later, they were gone because everybody knew what was happening.
mm.
Uh, uh, there is definitely freedom to say whatever. Like everybody is saying for the president to go, nobody says don't, or the majority. I can't say everybody, but the majority. And there is no censorship. There's no media, social media, because this actually, I think the thing was the protest was like it was due to the power cut, right? So
Mm.
they used to have this 5, 6, 10 people protesting in a junction on the side of the road or something. And one day it went because they went before the president's private house and protested, and there was a bit of there was some violence there, and immediately they blocked the internet, and social media was blocked for 2 days. And that really hits the young people. Nobody realizes that. You
Mm.
take, I have a young son, you take the social media out of their system, right? That really, really hurts them.
Mm.
And then only the younger people started coming out. Until then, it was always middle aged or more politically aware younger people who is. But on like that was the turning point, the blocking of the social media, that they considered that more fundamental personal right than anything else in this. And forget political power, but you need to keep me online. And that was quite apparent. And it was from that the whole thing turned from being a quite a benevolent or not a benevolent, quite a very small kind of thing, and it went viral was because of social media. I don't think this new generation can survive even 5 minutes without social media.
Mm, mm. Because that's one of the things, during this like Arab Spring. It's just one picture of this guy who,
Yeah,
put fire on himself, and
yeah,
then, from 5,000 to 5 million in like 48
yeah.
hours, and then,
Yes.
everyone on the street.
And then you can't control, you can't control information now. That I think
Yeah.
that is one of the lessons that the governments are also learning now. When they attacked the protesters on the it was 9th of May, 9th of May. So like attacking protesters, they bring people from out of Colombo in buses. They come, do their job, get into the bus and go back. Right, that has happened like several times. Right,
Mm,
but by the time they attacked, got into their buses, 15-20 minutes, the message has gone that the protesters were being attacked, and the bus within 20 minutes the buses were attacked, and that was all social media. And these are not politically aware people who are actually fighting, like protesting. It's all young. I think they are politically aware, but they are not the normal the polity that it gets involved in Sri Lankan politics. That's why they don't have these divisions, and they don't have this uh, the divisions are not there, because for them everybody is the same, which is quite refreshing to see after so many years of animosity.
No, I mean, I think that makes me a bit, more like comfortable, because I mean, I was obviously, the mainstream media in the Western world also, very toxic, lots of disinformation as well. And so that's why I think that we need to talk to the real people on the ground, and then, some kind of idea from the people who are there. And I think, I did the right thing and speak to you. And then I've got like much better understanding, and also, and I can see like there is a hope there. There is a hope there. And definitely, it's not like going down, to the bottom pit. So I'll kind of leave this conversation with like some kind of, comfort that, there is hope, and lots of good things can come out from this crisis.
This is an economic problem, right? But we have gone through much worse in the during the war from 1983 to 2009. Then there were southern insurrections in 87, 71, and at least in this instance, other than a few, there are no deaths, there are no people dying. So, and we have lived through all that, and we have always climbed back. Unfortunately, the smartness of the Sri Lankan people, our leaders' smartness has been used for something else. That is the problem. We are smart. Like smart means you don't have to be really smart in this country. Everything is there. Yeah, it's just that these guys use their smartness, but we are also a bit gullible. Like we take anything that the leaders say, and they have used that to our detriment. But there's all hope. Don't worry.
So you are a lawyer and also an academic as well, both.
Not an academic as such. I am a lawyer. I'm a practicing lawyer. I do mainly commercial law. I got involved in this subject actually because of the economic factors, and somewhere down the line somebody has to be held accountable for all this. So the Bar Association, that's the Bar Association of Sri, like the Law Society, the Bar Association gave a recommendation as to politically and economically how to get out of it. But no, at the moment, at one point that was gaining a lot of traction on how to have a multi-party government and stuff like that. So I was involved in that. But it's at the moment nobody is trying to follow that. So we are still hopeful that maybe the ultimate reasonable way of getting out is have a multi-party or a multi-party government in power, where all parties are stakeholders, and then get out of it and then go for a general election. So that is our hope. That everybody gets together and get over the troubles at the moment, and then let's go and have a political difference subsequently. At the moment, that is not happening. They are in their own corners. Hopefully, if everything turns out, it might work. But subject to that, I am a commercial lawyer. I do I am involved in commercial law.
But I mean, also you are kind of like independent voice as well, so you are lawyer, you are the part of that civil society. So like your society itself is a kind of big stakeholder in Sri Lanka's like
the Bar Association has been taking a very proactive role of every time somebody oversteps, especially during the last, it has been historically also, especially during the last couple of months, if anybody steps over any line, the Bar Association is the first to go and say that you can't do this, you have to change this. even if they get an idea that there's some challenge to the protest or something, they go and issue statements, and those challenges are taken away. So they have been very, very proactive, and there's a lot of appreciation of what the lawyers are doing at the moment.
Because it looks like, I mean, so obviously you've got professional commitment. You're quite busy there.
Yeah.
And also now this situation, society also demands some kind of your commitment and activism. So it's quite a lot of things coming. I mean, how do you manage your things, the sanity among all the
sanity of, if you have lived in Sri Lanka for more than a couple of years, you learn how to be. So because not one day is the same as the other day. You have basically it's a lovely place to live. There is an old poem which says whatever the Ceylon, as it was known, where everything pleases and only man is vile. Everything and you can do anything you want in Sri Lanka. Like within 2 hours, you are in the cold climate. You can go to the beach. Everything. Even now, it's not a big issue as such. But work goes on. It's just that at the moment the only impact on society is the fact that it's inconvenience, because there is no queue, there is no fuel, there is no gas. That inconvenience is there. And there's a lot of hardship, true enough. There's a lot of the cost of living is horrendous at the moment. But subject to that, life just goes on. If you do your job and then hope for the best for tomorrow. Because as I said earlier, this is nothing like some of the times we have lived through, because it has been a constant one issue after another. It's like a 5-year cycle. We get hit. If it is not man-made, it's nature. We had the tsunami, we had the COVID of everybody suffered. But every time it stabilizes, something happens. So you learn resilience. You learn to just keep your head down and get on with it, and hope tomorrow will be better. It's invariably tomorrow is always better.
Thank you.
You have to be positive.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I think I learned so many things from you. And I would love to learn more about Sri Lanka in future. So absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Votre toast, je peux vous le rendre, Seigneur, Seigneur, car avec les soldats, il est torero.